Okay, we're going to have another demo today, and it's going to be a segmented bowl. Now this bowl has 4 rings with 12 segments each. It has a Bubinga rim with maple splines in between, and the rest of it is bird's eye maple. Now, making the bowl is not nearly as difficult as you might think. It's just a matter of practice and a method. The most important thing in segmenting is the method that you use. Now, there's a lot of different methods available. Mine is not the only one, nor is it necessarily the best one. But it is mine, and it's the one that I'll put on this video. We'll get started in just a minute, and you can see how to go from absolutely the beginning of the process to the finished product in a single video. And I'm excited to make it, and I hope you enjoy watching it. Now, once we've decided what we're going to turn, what shape we're going to use, the next step is to pick the wood that you're going to make it out of. Now, I'm going to use some curly maple and a little bit of bird's eye and curly and some Bubinga. And this is all it would take to turn the bowl with quite a bit left over. These are 29 inches long. The longest one I need is 25. The other one is 22. The other one is 13. So it's not going to take that much of the maple. The Bubinga, I happen to have 2 pieces that will give me the length that I need, so I can cut all of my segments out of these 2 people, and I get to utilize some scraps. So we'll take what we have here, we'll go to our chart, and we will cut these to size. Okay, now we have all 4 of our blanks cut to the correct width, and now we need to cut them to the correct length. The first thing we need to do is cut the first 15-degree angle, and that doesn't need any measurements, you just cut it off. We need to measure that length. So I already have this set to the first measurement. And I just need to set up the stop . Once I have the stop, I just put down the locking lever, and now the piece won't move. And now I can slide that through. And now that would be my first segment. And that looks the way I want it. So I will just continue now and get the other 11. Now, that's my first set of segments. For the bottom of the bowl. And we'll put that in a clamp and we'll see how it looks and whether or not there's any gaps. Okay, now when I glue up my rings, I use hose clamps. And I usually like to put two of them together on one. You get more even distribution of the force created by the screw. When you just have one, you're tightening up a great deal on one half, but the other half, it does not have the same amount of tension on it because of friction. So I like to put two of them together, and that gives me a more even distribution of the force that is being produced. Now, it's very important that we get the ends lined up. So these corners are exactly even. So that when we get the whole thing clamped up, you can see it's very close. There are no gaps anywhere in it. And when the segments come off my sled, I don't check them, I don't sand them. I know because the jig is perfect that my segments are going to come out perfect. So that's the first ring. I'm not going to show the other three on camera. They'll be done exactly the same way this one was. Okay, this is what the ring looks like when it's time to glue it up. I put down a piece of wax paper so it doesn't get glue all over my table. I have the clamps ready so I don't have to adjust them once I'm putting the glue on. We have 12 pieces of wood that we have to glue up. And the glue that I use is Titebond 2. I use that for almost everything. The only other glue I use really is a little CA and a little 5-minute epoxy. But this is my go-to glue for segmenting. But you have 12 pieces that you have to glue together, and it's going to tack up in about 5 minutes. So that's all the time you have to get glue on all your pieces and get the clamp on it. So it's just something you have to get used to. I put enough glue on one side to do both sides. And then I attach that to two others. And now I have 3 segments done. I do the same thing. I put enough glue on at once to do both sides. And I put this up against that 3rd one and bring up the 5th one. So it goes very quickly this way. And you can get all 12 segments glued up in about 3 minutes. Now when we put the hose clamp on, we have to be very careful how we position the take-up pieces. They have to be across the flat. They can't be across a corner. They have to be down flat. And you can't really use your eyes to do this. I use my finger and going across each edge to make sure that one segment isn't high. Then I check all the corners to make sure that the corners are up even with one another. If they're not, it's going to cause a gap. And then once I'm sure I've got it, then I just tighten it down. And it only takes about 3 minutes to glue up a ring. And then we'd simply move on to the others. We won't do that in this video simply because it's not necessary. So we'll move on to the next segment. Okay, we've got all of our rings glued up. It's time to take them out of the clamps. So now each one of the rings are glued up. They're ready to sand smooth. They're not completely flat, and it's important that they be completely flat on the top and the bottom. Now we'll accomplish that by putting them through a powered surface sander, and we'll do that in the next segment. Now, we have all of our rings sanded flat. So you can, when you glue them up, they're going to glue up parallel to one another. Now, you can notice on here, there are no gaps. Even though the pieces extend all the way to the center, there's no gap in the center either. This is the way segments should glue up. All of the others are the same. There's no gaps in the glue up section of the segments. Now, the feature ring on top, this one with the splines in it, you noticed in the previous video that I spent more time on this than I did the other. It's thinner. And it just took longer to get it down to this thickness. I only need 1/4 of an inch, so it's not a problem that this is a little bit thinner than the others. The others pretty much need to be the same thickness, or it will show when you glue them up. Now that we have our rings completely glued up, the next step is to glue the rings together, and we'll do that in the next segment. Now, as you prepare to glue up rings, you have two major problems that you have to figure out a way to overcome. Number one, the rings have to be concentric. They can't be off center. If they do, it causes you a great deal of trouble while you're trying to turn it. Another thing that you need to be careful of is the radial alignment. The joint between two segments on one ring needs to align perfectly with the center of the full segment above and below it, so that it looks like a block wall where all of the blocks are aligned in exactly the same way throughout the whole wall. You need to have the same thing happen on your segmented turnings. Now, in order to do that, you have to figure out a way to hold them in the correct alignment while the glue sets up. Now, I've tried lots of different ways to do that. I've even built big elaborate jigs that would hold them perfectly in place. But I finally stumbled on a way to do it on the lathe. And for me, it works really, really well. The downside is it does require some equipment. In addition to having a chuck on your headstock, you need to have a set of jumbo jaws on your tailstock. Now, to be able to do that, it requires what's known as a reverse chucking adapter. These are available from a lot of different online sources. It has a number 2 Morse taper on one end, and it has threads that match your chuck on the other end. You can get this in both the 1 inch and the 1.25 inch size that'll fit most chucks. So you would start by putting your reverse chucking adapter in your tailstock. Then you take your second chuck with the jumbo jaws mounted, and notice I don't have all 8 of the buttons on it. There's only 4. Since we're holding a 12-sided object, we can't use 8. 12 is not divisible by 8, but it is divisible by 4. And we're not trying to hold it while we're turning, we're just trying to maintain the position while we glue it up. So having just the 4 is the ideal way to do it. And you simply install the jumbo jaws on the reverse chucking adapter. In the headstock, we put just a simple sacrificial. This is a piece of maple. You want to be careful what you use for your sacrificials. MDF is a very bad choice. If you get a catch while you're turning a piece that's held on the lathe by a piece of MDF, MDF has no shear strength, and it's really easy to simply twist 2 pieces of that MDF apart. You will leave one in your chuck, the other piece will be on your turning as it's bouncing around your shop. So I highly recommend against MDF. I don't even like pine. I generally use a hardwood, and you just install that in the chuck on your headstock. Now, the sacrificial is what we will actually turn the piece from. You take your number 1 ring, which would be your bottom, and if you have a preference as to which side is actually going to be the bottom of your bowl, you want to put that against the jumbo jaws. And as I look at it, this is going to be my better side. It has more eyes in it, since this is a piece of bird's eye maple. So that piece is going to go in just like this. Now, when you align this on there, you want to make sure that the button is in the center of the segment. If you get that off a little bit, it's going to throw that piece off center. So when you glue it up, it's not going to be centered. And you don't need to put a lot of pressure, you're just holding it while you glue it up. Now, when we do it this way, this piece, because of the jumbo jaws, is centered to the center line of the lathe, and so is the sacrificial. So when we slide that up, it's going to be automatically concentric. So I'm going to move the camera angle so you can see a little bit better what we're doing, and then we'll actually glue up this first ring to the sacrificial. Now we should be set up a little bit better now so you can actually see what's going on. We're about to glue this up, and the alignment on the sacrificial to this first ring really is not critical. It does not matter. It's how this one aligns to the other rings that matter. So we're not going to pay much attention to the actual position on here. And when I glue up a sacrificial, I like to use glue. It makes for me it's positive. There's a lot of people that use a lot of different methods when they attach a sacrificial to a piece. I'm going to turn this thing off completely anyway when I'm done. I don't use the double-sided tape much. I don't use the blue tape and the CA. And those are fine methods, and if it works, use it. My whole approach to turning when it comes to a method is if the method that you're using achieves the desired results and it's safe, then it's a good method. So use it. This is just the one that I like to use. Now, we have the first ring actually glued up to the sacrificial. It doesn't need to completely dry. All it needs to do is tack up. So when I put the second one on it, this one won't move. So it's not like I have to wait 30 or 40 minutes between gluing up segments. I only need to wait about 5. And I can take the jumbo jaws off, I can attach the next piece, and I can glue it up. And the first one won't move because it's already tacked up. And then when I put the last one up, then I can leave it under pressure for a couple of hours at least, if not overnight. And then everything will, it will set up and it will be ready to turn. So we're going to let this set for about 5 minutes, and then we'll be back and we'll put the second ring on. Okay, we now have our first 2 rings glued up. We've got the third ring on the jumbo jaws ready to glue up. And it's just a simple matter of applying a little glue. And we'll do the same thing with the alignment. I have my mark on the center of this segment, and I just line it up very carefully with the joint between the 2 segments on this side. Lock it down. Make sure my alignment is good. apply the pressure. And we'll let that sit for about 5 minutes, and then we can put the last one on. Okay, our third ring has tacked up sufficiently. We've now got the last ring on here. Again, I was sure to get this button right in the center, so I keep this perfectly centered. Now we just apply a little glue. Now these rings are exactly the same size, so it makes it a little easier to see for the alignment. And now we have our last ring glued. Now one thing I didn't mention earlier when we were sanding these on the power sander, I have 80 grit on the belt in that sander, and I glued these up with the 80 grit. Because of the roughness of the sanded surface, you get a much better glue joint because there's more for the glue to bite into. So when I'm gluing up segments, I don't sand my rings smooth. That doesn't defeat the purpose, but I get a much better glue joint if I leave it at the 80 grit than if I sand it to 220. But anyway, we have them glued up. As soon as they're dry, we're ready to actually turn it. And we will do that in the next segment. Okay, we're now ready to take the jumbo jaws off. And I haven't actually shown you the best way to get this back. If you just try to loosen the chuck key, because of all the pressure on the face of the jumbo jaws, it'll be very difficult to turn. So if you simply release the pressure on the tailstock, and then it's very easy then to loosen that to turn and slide it off. And we'll get that back out of the way. Now, the reason I like this method so well, you can see as I spin this, it is very, very well balanced. Nothing is out of round. So I'll be able to turn this where the width of my segments on one side will be the same as the ones on the other. If you get this off center while you're doing it, and when you spin it after you glue it up and it wobbles, and there's obvious misalignment, then when you turn it, you're going to wind up with a different width on the segment on one side than on the other because you took more off one side than you did the other. It wasn't even, it wasn't balanced. So that's why I like this method. It ties up the lathe, but if you time things right, it's not going to hurt you at all. So this one is actually ready to turn, and we'll get all set up and do that in the next segment. Okay, as we begin to turn the segmented bowl, we'll start on the outside and we'll get most of the segments off and get it smoothed out a little bit before we actually start doing the shaping. And it's going to kind of look like this. Now, we've got most of the rough parts away. Now we need to actually start applying a little bit of shape to it. We're going to have this section right through here undercut. And then it'll come down and then we'll curve around on here a little bit. So we'll do a little bit more of that shaping and then we'll move into the inside. Now we've pretty much got the outside roughed out. Now we're going to shift to a different camera angle and we'll start working on the inside a little bit. And then as we continue to work inside and out, we'll refine the shape until we get exactly what we want. Okay, now we're ready to start working a little bit on the inside, and we're going to do essentially the same thing. We have to take out all of the ledges in here so we have a better idea of what shape we're actually going to give it. Now we'll start with the bowl gouge. Now we're going to have to be way over here to begin with. We need that flute perpendicular to this sidewall. And as we go on in and start curving around, we'll swing the handle around and that will bring the bevel in line with the shape that we want to form. Okay, now we're ready to start working a little bit on the inside, and we're going to do essentially the same thing. We have to take out all of the ledges in here so we have a better idea of what shape we're actually going to give it. Now we'll start with the bowl gouge. Now we're going to have to be way over here to begin with. We need that flute perpendicular to this sidewall. And as we go on in and start curving around, we'll swing the handle around and that will bring the bevel in line with the shape that we want to form. So we've got a lot of the roughness out of here, so we're going to start doing a little bit more finer shaping. We've still got plenty of wall thickness. We've got to take this down quite a bit, so we'll start working on that. All right, we need to take quite a bit more of the face of this off. Now, we really need to start shaping the rim a little bit more. We only need about 1/4 of an inch of this rim. So we're going to have to take some of that off. Now we have about as much of this as we need, but we do need to shape the front of this lip. There's going to be a good sized curve on the face of this. Now, one of the design elements that I like on a bowl is a wider rim and then a curve both inside and out. So I'm going to have to undercut back in here a little bit. And that's about what I had in mind. Now we just need to start the contour. We haven't taken out any of the bottom. Now the bottom is 3/4 of an inch thick. Now I'm going to need, an eighth of an inch or so in the bottom for the O-ring that I'll put in the bottom on the outside. So I can actually go probably about 1/4 of an inch into this bottom, and I'll just have to establish a curve where the whole bottom curves. And it's all just a matter of getting the contour that you like and having the inside and outside pretty much fare out the same. I generally leave a little bit more thickness in the bottom just to improve the center of gravity, to put a little bit more weight at the very bottom. And I've just about got the curve that I want. I've got a little bit more that I want to do in here. I'm just about as deep as I want to go on that bottom. Now I'm getting pretty close to the final contour that I want on the inside. I've got my undercut that I'm looking for. I want it to be at about 3/8 wall thickness. I want this to be a little bit heavier than I normally make. I've got a little bit more work to do on the outside, but we're going to set up a little bit differently with a little different camera angle, and we'll do the actual final turning then. Okay, now we've got the inside turned just about as much as we're going to. What we need to do now is sand the inside of the bowl. Now, the problem with sanding while the lathe is spinning with just handheld sandpaper is you can't get the bottom sanded smoothly. If you look at the outside of the bowl, we have about 8.5 inches across here. Now, when this makes one revolution, the lineal distance that it's turned is going to be 3 times that, which is over 2 feet. So your lineal speed across here is 2 feet per revolution. But as you move closer and closer to the center, and you get to about here, now that is only about 1 inch in diameter. So each revolution only moves that about 3 inches. So there's a great difference in lineal speed on the outside and the inside. So the closer you get to the inside of the bowl, in effect, the slower the wood is turning. And when you get to the very center, it's not moving much at all. So if you just take a piece of sandpaper and hold it in here while the lathe is spinning, you're going to sand out here a whole lot more than you sand in the center. So you're going to wind up with a hump in the middle. And no matter how much you sand, you will never get that hump out. So what I do is I use a small sponge sanding disc in a drill, and I rotate the lathe and I rotate the drill. And what that will do for me is it will sand the center, and I won't have to worry about that because I've got the sandpaper spinning to get the center. Then I can get the bottom flat, and it looks something like this. You'll slow it down again to about 800 RPMs. And you want the disc turning in the opposite direction. So now that gets my bottom pretty well flat, and now we'll start working on the side. And just a little bit more on this side to get the bottom a little bit rounder. And we'll pretty much have this shaped. I'm going to go ahead and do some more sanding in here. I'm not going to change the shape at all. I'm just going to get it finished sanded. And then we'll be back after that, and we'll look a little bit more on the inside, and then we'll start working on the outside. Okay, now we have the final sanding on the inside and all of the shaping. So we're completely finished with both the inside and the rim. So all we need to do now is concentrate on the outside and get it faired in to where we're happy with it. And then we'll be able to cut the sacrificial off and then turn it around and hold it in the jumbo jaws, and we'll finish off the back. But I'm going to change the camera position and we'll look at how we'll finish up on the outside. Okay, we're set up again now, and the only thing we really have to do from this position in the chuck is to finish the contour on the outside of the bowl. Now, we're going to do that with the bowl gouge, and I'm close enough to where I'm just going to use a pull cut. And that will take off a small amount of material. It won't do much tear out, and I'll be able to wind up with a nice smooth surface that would be easy to sand. Now that will be pretty much what I want on the outside. I'm not going to be able to get all of this shaped in here because I don't want to get that close to this chuck. So once we turn it around and put this part of the bowl in the jumbo jaws, then I can get to the back of it without any trouble. So all I have to do now is sand all of this because I won't be able to sand this when it's on the jumbo jaws. So I'm going to go ahead and sand that, and then I'll show you how to get it off the sacrificial in a couple of different methods. Now, I've finished all of the sanding up to about here. I've got plenty to where I can hold it in the jumbo jaws and be able to turn and sand the remainder once I get it turned around. Now, like I said, there were several different ways that you could get this off, get the sacrificial off. There's enough room in there where you could actually pass a parting tool in here and cut it completely off that way. But that's some people would think that's a little bit tight, so we won't do it that way. For me, I have a jig that holds the entire chuck and the piece on my bandsaw, and I would just cut it off. But not everybody has one of those. So for the sake of this demonstration, we're going to go ahead and take it off. And we'll put it on the jumbo jaws, and we'll take the entire thing off on the jumbo jaws. And I'll get that set up and we'll be right back. Now, we have the bowl turned around and it's in the jumbo jaws. You notice we put all 8 of the buttons back on it because we want the maximum hold. Now, there's several different ways that we could work on this sacrificial. We could use a parting tool and work it down, or we could use a bowl gouge. You got a lot of different options that you can go with. You want to make sure it's on there very, very securely. We don't want to pull a bowl this close to finish off by making a mistake. Now, you'll have to turn your lathe down if you're using jumbo jaws. It's printed right on here that you should not exceed 1,000 RPMs. So we will set it up to 1,000 RPMs. And I'm just going to use a pull cut to start taking this off. Now I'm not going to put a lot of pressure. I don't want to tempt fate. I don't want to take the chance on ripping this bowl out of those jumbo jaws. So I'm not going to be in a hurry. Okay, so now we have the sacrificial completely off. We can go ahead and set up and finish shaping the bottom of the bowl. Now that's about the shape that I want. I'm going to stop here and sand it down. And then once I have it sanded, I'm going to go ahead and cut an O-ring in the bottom just to show you. The O-ring, of course, is optional. Not a lot of people do it, but I like to put the O-rings in the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and put it on the video, and at least you can see it being done. So let me get this sanded and I'll be right back. Okay, we have the entire bottom now sanded. For those that are not interested in O-ring, you could just quit here, as long as your bottom is flat enough for it to sit without rocking and rolling. Now, this is the O-ring that I'll put in. It's 3 inches in outside diameter, and it'll go right in the center. Now, before I can actually find the position for the O-ring, I need to find the exact center of the bowl. Now, and as it turns out, it's pretty much the exact center, so this bottom was centered quite well. I'm just going to measure out 1.5 inches from that point. And double check. Now that's a little bit big. So I'm going to cut inside that pencil line, and that'll give me the position for my O-ring. Now we're just going to use a parting tool. Now, when it comes to the depth that you want to go, you want some of the O-ring exposed, and it should be pretty close to 7/32. So if I go 5/32, that should be enough. So we'll just keep checking the depth until we get to 5/32. of an inch. And these are a little bit wider, so I'm going to have to make this groove a little bit wider. So I'm going to go to the outside a little bit. And then we'll try it. And now that's still a little bit tight. I'm going to do the outside a little bit more. And that's still just a little bit tight. I'm going to go to the inside this time. And now I've got my O-ring installed. Now the groove actually could be a little bit deeper. So I think I'm going to go a little bit deeper. And that's just about what I want. I've got enough protrusion with the O-ring where that's going to be the only thing that's going to be sitting on the bottom. And it puts a nice element in the bottom of the bowl. I'll put a decal in the center that identifies the woods, when it was made and who made it and all that kind of stuff. So, pretty much though, we are finished with this bowl. The only thing that's left would be to actually apply a finish. And on this particular bowl, what I think I'm going to do is spray a lacquer finish on it, and then polish the lacquer. So that's pretty much it. Let's take it off and take a look at it. All in all, it's a pretty nice bowl. And now each of you has to decide just exactly how you're going to make yours. And I wish you luck, and thanks for watching.